Good evening and welcome to the Palo Alto School Board Candidate Forum for Elementary Education. My name is Christina Schmidt, and on behalf of the PTA Council, I would like to welcome our candidates, our parents, our teachers, administrators, and our community audience. This evening, we have 5 of our candidates here, and our moderators will be introducing them in just a moment. First, in preparation for this event, we sent out notices to our elementary school families and our PTAs asking for questions that are relevant and important to our community. We understand that time does limit us and we will not be able to address all the questions tonight. Therefore, each candidate will be sent list of questions submitted to use as they deem appropriate. With that, I would like to introduce our moderators. Chris Hurt and Chris Colohan are the PTA co-presidents from Duveneck Elementary School, and they will be leading you through the guidelines and the questions for the forum tonight. So with that, I'd like to say, let's start. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina. Welcome everyone to the School Board Forum on Elementary Education. Tonight we're joined by 5 candidates, Mr. Todd Collins, Ms. Jennifer DiBrienza, Ms. Jessie Latimerek, Mr. Matt Nagel, and Ms. Karna Neiswaner. And we would like to review the guidelines for this evening's forum. We will start with the opening statements. Each candidate will have 1 minute to present their opening statements. We'll then move on to an advanced question, which was provided to the candidates in advance with the intention to allow them to form more thoughtful answers than impromptu questions. Again, each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Then we will move on to questions submitted by the community, also 1 minute for each candidate. And finally, candidates will have 1 minute for closing statements. The candidates will speak in rotating alphabetical order by last name. I will be timing. I'll hold up a yellow card when you have 15 seconds left and a red card when your time is up. Once your time is up, we can mute you. The order for the opening statements is Mr. Collins, Ms. DiBrienza, Ms. Latimerek, Mr. Nagel, and Ms. Neiswaner. And we are now on to question 1, introducing my co-president, Chris Colohan.
Oh boy, the joys of technical difficulties. Okay, so wait a second. We need the opening statements before we hand it over to me, Chris. That's what I'm confused by. Let's go with Mr. Collins on his opening statement.
All right, whatever you like, Chris. I'm happy to do it.
Go for it.
Hey, I'm Todd Collins. I'm your current school board president. I'm the father of 3 kids who have spent 32 combined years in PAUSD, and we've got 1 more to go. I went to Harvard undergrad and business school, and I've spent my career as a business person and entrepreneur, and more lately, a civic volunteer. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about current issues tonight, and those are very important, but at least as important is focusing on the fundamentals, which are the critical foundation that we need in order to succeed. 4 years ago, PAUSD faced years of scandals and unforced errors, like the $6 million blunder and repeated Title IX investigations. We put an end to those, bringing a team of new senior leaders and a culture focused on accountability, stability, and results. We can't take those things for granted. Without that kind of culture, we won't make sustainable progress on any objective that we have. When COVID's behind us, we'll have the same issues we had before, plus some new ones, and especially pressure on our budget. We'll need to strengthen outside partnerships and address the gaps in students' learning. I have the skills and experience to help guide us through those challenges, and I bring independent thinking and data-driven judgment to everything I do. So if you think a kids first, result-driven culture is important, I'm your candidate.
And Ms. DiBrienza.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you all so much for being here tonight, and thank you to PTAC for hosting this. Oh, okay. I think elementary is a really important topic, and sometimes it gets short shrift in this district, being a unified district. So I'm really glad to have this evening to talk. My name is Jennifer DiBrienza. I currently serve on our school board, served as board president in 2019. I'm an educator by profession. I've worked as a teacher, a staff developer, an education consultant, and I taught at Stanford after completing my PhD at the education school there. I have 3 kids, have been a parent in the district for over a decade. My oldest is in 10th grade, and my youngest is a 4th grader, so I've got about a decade to go. This combination of experiences has given me the benefit of having the board perspective, the teacher perspective, and the parent perspective. And it's given me added empathy, especially these past few months. Right now, we find ourselves in the biggest crisis yet in COVID, finding ways to support all of our students through the recovery. We have to focus on academics and mental health more than anything, as well as some basic needs for kids. So I look forward to doing that work in the coming year and beyond. And also focusing on closing our achievement gap through systemic work, which was my focus before COVID. I look forward to the conversation tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Ladimeric.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Jessie Fletcher Ladimeric. I grew up in Palo Alto. I attended Addison, JLS, Pali, and then Yale and Berkeley Law. I'm a former public agency attorney and now CFO and general manager of a remodeling company that I own with my husband. We have 4 kids in the district, 3 at Addison and 1 at Green. As a parent of 4 students, I am deeply connected to the current PAUSD community, kids and parents, teachers and staff. COVID-19 poses such difficult challenges for all of us. We are all anxious and scared. We are all craving certainty where there is none. And in the chaos and anxiety of this historical moment, PAUSD students need us to be our best selves. They need us to come together and do the work necessary to bring them through to the other side of this pandemic, thriving and excited about life and learning. This is why I'm running, to do this work. So thank you all.
And Mr. Nagel.
Thank you for hosting us tonight. My name is Matthew Nagel. You can call me Matt. I'm running for school board to provide the educational experience and leadership experience that our school board desperately needs right now. A bit about me: I've been a principal and a teacher for 30 years, including 3 here in Palo Alto. I'm studying in a doctoral program right now in educational leadership for social justice. My wife, Ms. Peñalosa, has taught at Escondido School for 20 years. My son, Mateo, is a freshman at Gunn High. He graduated from Fletcher and previously attended Escondido. My daughter, Anais, also attended Escondido and Terman and is now a junior at Yale studying chemical engineering. Top issue right now is getting back to school. Right now, it's kind of a rush job. We need to do it safely. Other key issue is educational equity, meaning we should have better outcomes for all of our students. I am ready right now to support all of our students so they can again pursue their dreams the way my 2 kids have been able to pursue theirs in Palo Alto schools. Thank you for your support.
All right, now we can move on to the first question. Chris, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, my video.
Yes.
Forgot Karna.
I'm on a roll tonight, guys. Ms. Nicewater.
All right. So hi, thank you all for attending. My name is Karna Nicewater. I am a working mother of 2 Addison Elementary students, and I studied engineering at Princeton and law at UCLA. And for the last 20 years, I've been working as a lawyer at companies in the Bay Area and other locations, where currently I manage a team of 12 and a multi-million-dollar budget. I also serve on the board of Palo Alto Community Childcare, which provides the elementary kids clubs that so many of us utilize at PAUSD schools, and has been providing services to kids since June. And for me, the spring experience was so horrible, and I was so angry, and I really wanted the school district to do more. And the summer didn't improve my feelings. It made me feel very frustrated and still very angry that I didn't know what was going on. The communication was poor. It was just really difficult. And I felt that my background and my experience would be able to help this board coach the administration into doing a better job of communicating to employees, communicating to the community, and really help fix some of the structural issues that are in place that even before this pandemic made communication engagement difficult, particularly for some parts of our community. And I just think it is critical that we come together to create the best possible education for all of the students in this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Neiswaner. So now we're going to move on to the advanced question, the one which you received it before. And when we're going through the questions, I like to summarize this question of, this job is crazy. Why the hell do you want it? But that's not what the parents asked. They asked, what is your top priority for our school district? And is there a particular issue that motivates you to serve on the Board of Education? And so our first answer will be from Mr. Collins.
Okay, great. Thank you. I do have an issue that I think is a top priority, and I didn't discover it until after I joined the school board. One of the things I went around when I joined the school board was I asked all the senior managers, what is the main purpose of what we're doing? How do we know if we're doing a good job? And what I found is there weren't very many coherent answers. And the answers that I got were not consistent at all. So one of the things I set out to do was try to figure out what the goal of our district is. And I'm not sure I've got it all figured out, but one thing I know for sure, and I have this I keep this in my office, is something that was said by Assistant Superintendent Lana Conaway, which is we simply can't call ourselves a great school district if we're not getting great results for the most challenged and least resourced students. And I fundamentally believe, I don't know all the truth, all the right answers to this, but I know that's one. And we have not done a good job at that historically. We're below state and county averages for low income students. And my top priority is improving that.
Cool. Next, we will have Ms. Latimerich.
So what motivates me to serve is our kids. I never in a million years would be running for school board if not for COVID. And ironically, it was actually not the chaos of the spring that made me run, but its aftermath. It was the summer when I finally had a chance to take a breath and try to mitigate the trauma for my kids in various ways. I created a schedule of reading and math workbooks each day to proactively deal with learning loss. I scheduled a week away at the beach so they could play in the waves without masks and almost be normal. Mostly I didn't schedule anything. I just watched them run around with a few close friends and laugh and be carefree again. The whole time I couldn't stop thinking about how lucky my kids were and how many kids in PAUSD were struggling so much more, from COVID itself to learning loss and social isolation and depression. And I'm talking about kids from every walk of life, low income and affluent, special needs and not, white, Black, Latino, Asian. They are ultimately why I am running. I want to be a voice for all of them.
Thank you. And apparently I'm trying to one up Chris on messing up orders. We're supposed to have Ms. DiBrienza answering.
Thank you so much. I wasn't sure if I had misunderstood. We'll get it worked out.
It was all me.
Right now, the top priority for my district is COVID recovery. Right now, it's how kids are doing remote academically and even more importantly, mentally, emotionally, and how they're feeling connected to school and to friends and to being okay. And on top of that, kids who are struggling and families who are struggling with basic needs, and our staff, how they are doing emotionally. So there's so much there that is on top of the regular stuff that a school district does. And that is my focus this year. I think that's all of our focuses this year. And I want to really make sure that kids emotionally come out of this on the other side after this trauma, doing okay, and that we do our best to make up for learning loss. Generally, my focus has really been on equity and serving a wider swath of kids better. So to make kids' demographics no longer being a predictor of success in our district.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel.
So the top priority is reopening our schools as fast as possible, but as safe as possible. PPE and all the supplies should have been set in place in August. We've known since spring that we weren't coming back. I mean, if we didn't know, then that's a problem right there. It's great that we're getting some testing for staff, but we're not testing the students. LA Unified has had this set in place 2 months ago with Stanford. We should have had it set 2 months in Stanford. So really getting our schools back as safely as possible. We're not there yet. It's not really safe. But getting there is my top priority. Before I didn't get into the school board race before COVID, I had thought about it for about 8 years now for this particular district. And what's motivated me are my own kids and all the kids of color, especially, who are not enjoying that academic success. My own Mexican-American son, he's now in the Palo Alto decline for a Mexican-American kid. Test score wise, it was happening to my daughter until I took her with me to West Marin School. And because I was principal, I was able to put her in geometry. And from there on, she excelled. And now she's in the Ivy League. And frankly, everybody, especially our brown and black kids, should have that opportunity to attend the Ivy League, or at least aspire to it. I hear it's pretty good. I didn't go there. But again, we need to look at our kids as
Thank you. And Ms. Nicewaner.
So what motivated me originally to want to run is all the working moms I knew that had to quit their job in order to help take care of their kids and help take care of their kids' educations. I was lucky that I had support from my husband and family, and I was able to get through this time with education loss for my kids. But that was what inspired me. And what really concerned me is the real impact the shutting down of the schools had, not just on the students, but on the families and on our entire community. And to me, the thing that I want to work on or focus on most on this board is really the transparency and communication around decision-making and about how we are deciding things, and are we considering all of the implications, and how can we do better in making sure people feel like they're listened to and not just ignored, but also that we are putting in place the right metrics of measurement on how kids are doing, particularly the mental health issues that I think are going to live with us for another decade after this trauma to all of our children from the pandemic response.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to our second question, which is the first question the candidates haven't seen in advance. So good luck. This question is, do you support the board's vote to reopen schools? If not, what would you do differently or change in the current plan to make it safe enough for students to return to campus? And first for this question, we have Ms. DiBrienza.
Great, thanks so much. Yeah, this was a big decision, and I voted for it. So yes, I support it. I think that it is safe for our kids to be back, and we've had 3 days so far where everyone's feeling a lot better. I think where we fell down on the job was making sure we convinced the entire community and teachers that it was safe. But I saw the safety plans, and I knew that if anyone had a question for me or was calling into the board meeting the question, there was an answer to that, and that staff was on it. So I felt confident that it was actually a safe thing to do, but I understand that we had not yet convinced the entire community that it was safe to do. So if we have a chance to do it all again, I would definitely say we need improvement on that communication part. But there are many, many families, more than half of the families so far that have had to choose, have chosen to return hybrid. They were wanting us to come back if it was safe. The county has told us it was safe. We have followed county guidance all along, and I think that's exactly what we should be doing. So I'm glad that we're reopened for those who feel comfortable coming back.
Finding that unmute button is hard. Okay, and now we got Ms. Latimerek. Thank you.
I would have voted to reopen. And my reason is because PAUSD exists to educate kids. And while many kids are fine in distance learning, there are thousands that are not receiving an effective education. And these students cut across all income brackets, all abilities, all racial demographics. And it's not their fault or the teacher's fault, it's just the limitations of distance learning. I think it's heartbreaking that so many teachers are so scared. No one should be afraid to go to work. There are people all across this country that are afraid, and they all break my heart. I know the childcare providers that are supporting PAUSD students with distance learning are afraid. My own painters and carpenters who work for my company, who I had to decide to send back to work, I know they are afraid. And our teachers are clearly still afraid. As we reopen, we have to be vigilant about physical safety, and we also need to be vigilant about emotional safety. I talk a lot in my campaign about student mental wellness as a prerequisite for deep, meaningful academic engagement. The same goes for teacher mental wellness.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel.
Yeah, I would have voted no. And the reason is, last night at the board meeting, we saw pictures again of boxes of supplies. We saw an emergency truck sent down an emergency all the way to LA to pick up supplies. That was a sign of lack of organization, lack of ability, but they were cheering it. The school board was actually cheering that. What I would have done to make it safe enough is I would have delivered all the PPE, all the desk dividers, and installed them correctly. A lot of places didn't get them installed correctly, had to be redone. Step one, get all the classrooms done in August. Step two, get those air filtrations done in August. Step three, get the testing system. Get it all done for students and for staff all in August. Then we could have opened up a month earlier with a higher degree of confidence among our employees and for our students.
Thank you. Ms. Nicewater.
So I would have definitely voted yes, because I think our students absolutely need to be back in campus. My big disappointment is that we are not reopening faster and we are not reopening for more grade levels. I talk with parents at junior high and high school who would love their children to also be back. The county guidance allows for this, but it's the poor planning and the poor organization from the administration that I think has led to this delay in being able to actually move quickly. And I look at PAC, who is providing elementary childcare, and they've been on site since June. And yes, those teachers were scared when they went back, but we walked through the safety measures, and they've been working since June with our elementary kids safely with no COVID spread. So to me, the lesson to be learned there is we need better planning, we need better organization, we need better communication, because this is what our kids need. They need to be on campus and they need to be learning from their teachers. And we need to create an environment that is safe and comfortable for those teachers to work in. And if we can do that, we can be like all of the other school districts that are open.
Thank you. And Mr. Collins.
Thanks. I did vote to support the opening plan and to open the schools for K-1 on October 12th. It's been the district's goal since summer to open the schools as much as we can, as soon as we can, when it was safe to do so. Because we know that many families desperately want that for their children, and we want to be able to offer that option to those who need it. I really believe that the safety plan, which I've been, as people have said in board meetings, I've crawled into HV closets. I've read the papers on ventilation requirements. I've talked to public safety officers. I've talked to probably a dozen other school districts that are open to understand what their plans were. And I felt comfortable that we could do this safely. So I do support the plan.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to move on to, well, it turns out this was a really popular topic in the questions that we got. So we have 2 questions on this topic. And so the second question is more, instead of focusing on what you would do differently, how would you communicate it differently with both the teachers and the parents? So let me tell you the question. The current board voted unanimously to go ahead with the plan to reopen elementary schools. How do you feel about that? Would you have handled the discussions with the community and teachers any differently so they all felt heard? And we're going to start with Ms. Latimerek.
There is clearly a breakdown in trust between the district and teachers. And listening to the meeting last night, 2 things became very clear. The district staff and the board are all comfortable that we have done everything possible to minimize the risk of COVID. And many teachers still do not trust that that is true and do not feel safe. I don't know what happened. I wasn't part of those conversations. I don't know about the relationship between the teachers and the union and the district. All I know is that it's the district's responsibility to fix it. Honestly, some of the tension might not be resolvable. PAUSD can't completely eliminate the threat of COVID, but we absolutely must do better with making sure that our teachers feel that we've done everything we can, that we have their backs, and that we're in this together. The questions about communication, and there's no quick fix to rebuilding trust. Trust is about relationships and about believing that even when you disagree, that the other person values and hears you. So I think we just have to keep listening and showing up and showing that we're listening.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel.
Yes, at last night's board meeting, we had the superintendent, Don Austin. He was telling us, almost bragging, that he's sent over 1 million emails in, I don't know, the last couple of weeks, a month or whatever. I think even the board would agree, quantity is not better than quality. One good email would be better than the dozens I've received. Case in point, the last superintendent email on Friday, I don't know if he was playing a joke, if he was angry, if it was the board doing this, but the email was so long. It wasn't usable. We as parents are not going to wade through all that. I don't want to see that kind of nonsense. So, thirdly, the teachers are not on board. I saw the disconnect. I heard administration and the board saying, we're going to do this next week and we should have done this. Don't tell us what you're going to do. Tell us what you've done.
Thank you. Ms. Neiswaner.
So I have found that the follow-up and feedback we're getting from the superintendent is really difficult to parse. And I look at what other school districts did in putting together one PDF on their homepage that walks through all of the issues. I mean, that's what PACT did on their page. Here's one page that gives you everything we're doing. I think we need to summarize and put things in an easily accessible way to people so that we understand what's going on. And I think that we need to take a step back and understand why people are expressing these concerns. It's because they don't feel heard. And that's why we had 100 teachers coming up and talking. So there's some breakdown in the teacher communication with their union, with the district, and it's not clear what the gap is or why there's this gap. And then there's a bunch of parents that are very concerned, but they have that option of distance learning. There's a bunch of parents that clearly really want hybrid because they've chosen it. 81% of my son's second grade chose hybrid. So it's important that we listen to everyone, and perhaps having better polls or better surveys would serve that instead of having those types of questions hidden at the end of a 40, paragraph email from our superintendent.
That didn't work, apparently. Thank you.
I was going to say we lost some.
Collins. I said it, but I apparently didn't unmute. Go ahead.
Am I next, Chris?
Mr. Collins is next.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry, I didn't hear you. Yeah, this is a big topic. So I'll touch on just a part of it, which is, as I said at the board meeting last night, I think there's, when we talked about hiring a public information officer, one of the reasons I was hesitant to do that as a point solution is I think our internal communication issues may actually outweigh our external ones, or actually be harder to fix and more complicated to address. And that's where I'd like to see the superintendent and his team kind of focus their efforts, because we have, it's a complicated environment. We've got a labor union. We deal with the labor union. There's been continuous negotiations since spring, but the labor union and the teachers as employees are different. And we've clearly focused a lot of energy communicating with one, and not enough effort, and not having the right channels to communicate with the other. So I think that's a complex process that doesn't get fixed in a day or with a single hire. But I do think it's one that will pay big dividends for the district going forward, since we need to have strong relationships with our teachers.
Thank you. And Ms. DiBrienza.
Yeah, thanks. I referred a little bit earlier to the decision to reopen and the communication issues. I think there has been a lot of information to convey, and I don't think we've done a very good job conveying it. I would agree that a PIO is for external communications, but a comms person, we've got over 30,000 people we regularly communicate with: parents, teachers, staff, students, the press. And that's a thing, to be good at communicating all the things you need to communicate in the ways you need to communicate them takes skill. And we have a district office that is full of some very skilled educators, not necessarily people that are trained in this communications field. So I don't care if we have an individual doing it or if we just identify what needs to be done and make sure we do it. But there are internal comms and there are external comms. And right now we're dumping a lot of information out there, but it's not in an easily digestible form. So whatever work happens next, I wanted to make sure that we're communicating it effectively to all parties.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And lucky you, we get a new topic now. And so this is totally unrelated to the past month. So great. And the question is, to what extent do you see the job as reading the materials prepared by the PAUSD administration, then showing up to board meetings to vote, versus doing your own time-consuming work to study the issues and form an independent view, learning the powers granted to board trustees and exercising those powers? And starting off, we have Mr. Nagel.
Okay. Well, actually, I do see being a board member as what it is, and I often try to recruit parents. I did in my other district. I try to recruit parent after parent by telling them, no, it's not going to be that hard. And I know that's false advertising. It's not going to be that hard. You're going to be able to do it. You just have to vote yes or no, and that's basically it. And so we have to vote yes or no on a number of issues. We have to supervise and evaluate the superintendent. But you're right. You need to have an independent view. There need to be 5 independent views and perspectives who come together, and even on a 3-2 vote, you end up having a unified decision and you stick behind that decision. And I think with my 30 years of experience as an elementary school principal, elementary school teacher, I have a great wealth of knowledge and ability to make these decisions and to look out for all of our kids.
Thank you. Ms. Neiswaner.
So having served on the PAC board, I understand it is very important for you to read and understand all of the issues that are coming up before you. And you are an oversight to an organization. So you need to hold the organization responsible for fulfilling their mission, which is to make sure all of our kids get an excellent education. And so you need to question them when you don't think what's happening is serving that mission of making sure our kids get an excellent education. And some of the ways in which you do that is you have a relationship or knowledge or community engagement that helps you see sort of broader than just that one engagement with what you're hearing from the administration. Because fundamentally, you're a fiduciary to those students, to making sure that the community tax dollars are spent well, and making sure that we are all focused on the right thing, which is making sure our kids get an excellent education, and questioning things when you don't think what's happening is really serving that interest, and not just relying on what people tell you, but actually digging in a little as well.
Thank you. Mr. Collins.
Hey, thank you. I don't know anyone who takes the view. I haven't seen a board member in the last 20 years who took the view that just showing up to vote was the nature of the job. So I think that's a little bit of a straw man. The question is, where do you focus your attention on gathering outside input, and how deep do you go? My personal approach has been, I've gone very wide and very deep. I've visited schools all over our area and all over the state, including district schools, charter schools, basic aid schools, state-funded schools. I created a metric to measure the performance of schools all over the state compared to the student populations they serve, to identify the outliers, and called up those districts to figure out what they do and how they do it. So I think there are different dimensions that school board members can go to go deep, and I don't think everybody can do all of them. But I think it's critical for people to understand their role and to create an independent way of thinking about the work the district does.
Thanks. And Ms. DiBrienza?
Thanks. I will start by saying I agree that I don't think that I haven't seen really any people just show up and read the packet and vote. But I do think that there are very different views of the role of a board member. I think one of the nice things that's come out of these forums is that I think we're pretty much all in agreement that a board member is not an employee. We're not doing the work of the district. We're not making the decision as to what the best curriculum is or what the best X or Y is. We're board members and we provide oversight. So while we might not always say, oh yeah, that's totally what I would have done, or that's what my kid benefits from, if there's a rationale for why it makes sense, that's something that makes sense to me. I think in this particular case, being a current parent in the district, especially at both elementary and secondary, gives you some added insight because you see how your kids are experiencing it, how your kids' friends are experiencing it, how your friends' kids are experiencing it. And granted, that's just a sliver, but it gives you more perspective and helps you keep in mind that the only thing to pay attention to is not the 50 loud voices, that there's a lot of other voices that maybe aren't speaking up quite as loudly.
Thanks. And Ms. Latimeric.
You have to read everything that staff gives you, and you have to go beyond that. You have to ask questions, find out, what you're missing, what they're missing, find out where they're coming from. But even that's not enough. I've been a staff member who's gone to board meetings with an executive director and prayed inside my head for the board to ask her tough questions that they didn't ask, knowing that there was more going on. And I really think that, the board's job is governance and oversight. And in order to provide effective oversight, you have to have enough metrics to do your job. And I think we're missing the metric right now of a wide breadth of perspective of parents and students and teachers and staff. I'm really committed, if I'm elected, to being proactive about reaching out and getting that perspective. As a busy working parent, I know how hard it is to show up and come to board meetings and keep yourself really involved and engaged in the district. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show up, I'm going to reach out, and I'm going to make myself accessible to people.
Thank you so much. Our next question is about money. And so here we go. The question we got is, with less pie donations coming in this year, how will you manage the budget for the next school year? How will you allocate the board fundings if you were to do so? And to lead off, we have Ms. Neiswaner.
So I get the hard question, which is, how do we deal with the fact that we have so many amazing programs? And this is a school district that really loves the extent and quality and quantity of programming that exists. And I think specific to elementary, PI is paying for our science programming that's coming in from the outside. It's paying for our art programming. It's paying for a lot of things that we really enjoy and our kids really enjoy. But at the end of the day, if we have to cut some of those extras so that we can focus on making sure that everybody learns to read, everybody learns their arithmetic, and focus on those core competencies, I think that's where we're going to have to focus. And, hopefully with the declining enrollment, most of that decline really is in the elementary area, we'll be able to maybe have fewer teachers and more programming for the kids that will be exciting and interesting. But at the end of the day, it's the core is the education. That's our core mission, to make sure all of our kids get the best education possible.
Thank you. And Mr. Collins.
This is a great question. And pie donations, while important, are not are joined by basically every other source of funding going forward, including our parcel tax, which, as most people know, is up for renewal on the November 3rd ballot. We started a new budget process actually last year with our new CBO and our new superintendent that basically focused on making critical assumptions about where we want to allocate money before going through the budgeting process. We used to do it at the end, and we'd literally have board members fighting over $40,000 allocations for single part-time employees because we literally only had the scraps to fight over at the end. Now we've front-loaded the discussion to the beginning, so we can focus on what are the things that are most important, and let's put our money where our priorities are. And I think we will definitely follow that process this year. There will be challenges in the budget this year, next year, the year after that. It's going to be a continuous problem, but I think that process will be a good one.
Thank you so much. And Ms. DiBrienza.
Yeah, Mr. Collins just really explained how we're doing our budgeting now, which I think is a huge improvement over how it was when I first came onto the board. And it really allows us to make sure we are explicit about our assumptions and our priorities before we start allocating money in different places. And money's just going to be wonky for a few years, right? We have COVID relief dollars, but we have less rental income, but we have more, we've saved some money on other things. It's just going to be up and down, and we don't know how property taxes are going to come in. So I think we really have to just go from that place of here are our top priorities, here are our assumptions, and let's go from there. And hopefully, especially at the elementary level, these things will all still be in place. We've kids learn through music and art and everything else as much as they learn through books. And so hopefully, my priority would be that at the elementary level, all those things remain. And we'll just figure it out.
Thank you. Ms. Latimeric.
So I'm CFO and owner of a remodeling company. Our budget is not as large as PAUSD's, but it is still millions of dollars. And we're similar to the district in one crucial way. Unlike so many organizations, like Fortune 500 companies and the federal government, we actually have to balance our budget. And when money is actually money instead of monopoly money, it forces you to be principled about the way that you spend it. So to me, this means two things. One, our budgets are policy documents. They are a quantification of priorities. And literally, this means you have to put your money where your mouth is. You're not really prioritizing something unless you pay for it. Two, we have to maximize the value of our investments. So if we spend $1, we have to get $1 worth of value, or find another way to spend the dollar. And that value needs to be measured by the outcomes for our students. And the third thing I want to say is I would like to look to find efficiencies. So an example of this is the district's recent move to online filing system, which saved probably millions of dollars annually. Are there more things like that we can identify?
Thank you. And Mr. Nagel.
I'd like to manage our money as prudently as possible. Obviously, we do need the parcel tax to pass in 20 some days. I know that if it doesn't pass, and I'm on the board, I'll be able to communicate with voters properly, openly, and transparently, because if it doesn't pass, it will pass in March, because I'll make sure it's on the ballot. We need that parcel tax to run our schools. I was a principal here for 3 years, and it was important. During that same time, we had a budget issue, 2009, 2010. We had to cut supplies by a great deal. We had to have attrition. And right now on the board, I would be looking for attrition in admin and attrition in certificated positions that are not in the classroom. Whatever you do, we cannot cut classroom teachers or classroom aides, especially the latter. They're paid so little, yet we get so much out of them for our elementary students. So last thing is just survey the stakeholders, find out their priorities. We did that in the last recession.
Thank you. So we're halfway through the questions. All the candidates can now give a nice stretch and get ready for the next one. We're going to switch topics again. And this time, this question, although it refers to the pandemic, it's not really about it. It's more about the structure of the school district and what you see as the proper structure. And the question goes like this. That pandemic has shined a light on many things, including the different ways the elementary schools and their teachers want to handle hybrid learning with the reopening of in-person instruction. Generally, how should the district think about balancing elementary school autonomy and flexibility with a desire to provide a uniform experience regardless of the elementary school? Specifically regarding in-person instruction, how should the district balance the two? And we're going to lead off with Mr. Collins.
Hey, that's a great question. It is, we need to have, if you go back 10 years, we had complete autonomy at the elementary level. There was very little consistency. One of the sayings was, we have 12 elementary schools and 13 different bullying programs, which was actually true. We've swung, we found that it was very difficult to create initiatives that went across the whole district because there was not enough consistency or even paying attention to what the district office and the board wanted to do. So we've created a layer of things that I would call non-negotiables that are the standards and protocols that we need every school to follow. But that said, beyond that, we want schools to absolutely want schools to take the initiative. And things like, I know there are elementary schools that want to do live streaming and have bimodal classes. I think that's a great idea. I was talking to Mary Pat at Nixon, and I encourage them to pursue that. I think that would be great.
Cool. Now we're going on to Ms. DiBrienza.
Thanks. I agree that there should be a certain non-negotiables that all of our schools provide for all kids, no matter what site you're at. You've got to get a good education for your kid. And there are many ways that we could measure that, from satisfaction to our kids meeting benchmarks, lots of different things. There are certain curricula that we want to make sure everyone uses to make sure kids get certain experiences. When it comes to this, I'm really torn on this. I actually loved the idea that the Nixon teachers came up with, and I remember the Walter Hayes teachers had proposed something else, and I remember talking to Fairmeadow teachers about something else, and any of them would have been great. The big concern is, if Nixon starts live streaming and I'm a parent at Walter Hayes and I want to live streaming, do I start lobbying my principal? Do I start lobbying my individual teacher? Do I start lobbying the teachers union? And then there's this pressure, as well as being in this pressure cooker situation. Now we've got different parents lobbying for different modalities that they want. So I do think that because we have a teachers union and we do collective bargaining, that model has to go through there. I would love to see us come back to the table and continue talking about what different modalities could be. That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Latimerek?
This is such a good question. And it really is, I think with COVID, it really drove home how much difference there was between schools, between grades within schools, and even between classrooms within grades within schools. Kids were having entirely different experiences in the spring. It's evened out a little bit from what I've been hearing in the fall. But it really can become an equity issue. It can become an issue of some kids are having wonderful experiences and some kids aren't. And I really think that autonomy is so important for buy-in, for community excitement and motivation. And I would love to see the district work to be more proactive about getting different teachers and sites and schools learning from each other and sharing best practices and highlighting things that are really working, to try to bring people along to really learning from each other and all of the wisdom that there is out there. So we're not dictating it from the top down, but we're still kind of getting a result that's better.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel?
Yeah, it's interesting to hear Todd talk about, I think what he's saying is site-based management, site-based leadership. As a principal 10 years ago here in Palo Alto, it wasn't quite as free as it's made out to be. There was a lot of pressure on us to be as standardized at all the schools. So, right now, I think the pendulum has swung too far. And I think, COVID-19, it's a novel coronavirus. We need a novel solution or novel solutions. I would really like to see a pilot program at one of the elementary schools. It's silly to make everybody do the same awful thing. Distance learning is not so great. My son's doing okay with it. Hybrid learning is not going to solve the things you think it's going to solve. A lot of epidemiologists out there who are saying you're just going to have twice as much exposure now. So I would really support and with strong leadership of having one school, one elementary school, being given permission to try something other than what we have now.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Neiswander.
I think one of the things we all really love is the individual nature of our schools. We get really devoted to either our choice school or our neighborhood school, because that's where we have our friends and that's where we have our community. And so having the flexibility to create that community within that school, I think, is really important. But it does raise issues of inequality, because some schools will put together a lot of programs that other schools don't. And so when we love that individuality, I think it does have this potential to highlight the inequality within our district, and the inequality of services and quality of teachers and principals. I also think what's important when we think about this is, learn from the schools and the different things they're doing. One of the things we did not do in the spring is try different things. And from trying those different things, come together and say, is this something we should roll out more broadly? So instead of just one school, have every school say, what do we think will work? Try, learn from it, try something new. This is a great chance for us to experiment and learn and create better educational experiences across the board for our children.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to a question of trust. And the question is this: How will you exercise oversight in a way that rebuilds the trust of parents and staff in the district through this reopening period that has been done with so little accurate communication with staff, even with parents? Start off with Mr. Collins.
Thanks. I only know one way to build trusting relationships, and that's to consistently be sincere, open, and constructive, and to be the same, be that way myself, and to be that way with all the stakeholders that we have to deal with. There's no silver bullet. They're just saying trust is built with an eyedropper and thrown out with a bucket. And we need to start applying the eyedropper to building trust with every one of our stakeholders. So I don't think there's anything, any particular action. There are no silver bullets or fast tracks or shortcuts. I think you need to sincerely interact with the stakeholders and be candid about our positions, and be candid about listening to their concerns.
Thank you. Ms. DiBrienza.
Thanks. Yeah, it's slow going. It has taken a hit, and it's not going to be a quick fix. I think the first thing that is vital is that we follow through on everything we said we were going to do, right? I think that the board felt pretty confident that the safety measures we said were in place were safety measures that were in place, and that it was going to be okay. And that needs to happen. And I think staff feels the same way, and staff knows that that's really important. So that's the first step, to show that everything that we said we were going to do and that we were doing was done, and that it did follow county rules. And from there forward, communication, two-way communication. I think that for a long time, messages have been crossed through us talking to the union and the union talking to their membership and them hearing something different than someone else said. And I think that even though we engage in collective bargaining, and that means negotiating through the union, it doesn't mean that we don't have an opportunity to have a two-way conversation with the employees of the district directly, apart from the negotiating. So that's a big part. And then parents, we've got to make the communication clearer and provide more feedback loops for everybody.
Thank you. Ms. Latimerek.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that there is no quick fix to rebuilding trust. I mean, trust is about relationships and believing that the other person values and hears you. Over the past decade, I am lucky enough to have developed close relationships with lots of teachers and staff, and I am definitely going to lean into those relationships to help try to forge a path forward. Effective communication really requires a district-wide commitment to a culture of transparency and meaningful community engagement. And engagement, it's our job to engage. And engagement means, to me, proactively reaching out and touching the community and reaching out to parents and students and teachers and staff, because showing up makes people feel like you value them. It's not just lip service. And right now, honestly, it feels like community input is something that the district endures versus values. And we have to change that. It has to become a partnership. So the way I'm going to do it is just keep showing up.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel.
Well, I think what you're seeing here is a lack of leadership and a lack of responsibility. And I don't want to sound too negative there, but this can be repaired, the trust that is. Number one, I apologize, just like that. Once I get elected, I'm sorry. I didn't even cause the problem, but we have to apologize. Number two, we've got to listen to all our stakeholders. We have to engage all our communities. Palo Alto is very different. Our East Palo Alto and East Menlo Park kids, different communities. We need to engage them all personally, and we need to survey them all. We need to report back what we heard, and then most importantly, we need to lead and follow through, okay? Especially with the teachers, because that bridge has been burned, and I say let's get together as soon as possible. We can quickly begin building a new bridge.
Thank you. And Ms. Nicewaner.
For the question of oversight, what I think is really important is that we actually make more requests of administration to provide more data. Provide data on what is really there, provide copies of all of the checklists that are in front of all of the doors, provide reports of here are the issues and here's how we resolve them. I think until we hear that there are issues and they've been resolved, if all we're hearing is things are great, then there's less trust. But if we acknowledge some things didn't go so well, and here's how we're addressing it, or this was one issue that was raised, we now have a new process for managing that. I think that concerns and issues come up, but if you don't look at what's causing it and then come up with a process and plan to manage it forward, people continue to have that lack of trust and they continue to not know what's going on. And so by creating more infrastructure around what's being communicated and how it's being communicated from the administration to the board and then to the greater community, I think we can start the process of rebuilding trust, although I think it'll be very slow.
Thank you. So now we're on to question 8. We're getting through a lot of questions tonight. This is great. So this question goes like this. Given the forecasted delays in learning due to COVID, would you support extending the academic year or offering summer programs to get children back up to speed? I'll give you a second to think about this before I call on Ms. DiBrienza.
Thanks. I would support the option. I think it's very important that after we've all been locked down for a year, that if we can travel or get outside and, play next summer, that's my first priority. There definitely will be learning loss and we have to deal with it. If there's a way to deal with it at times over the summer, great. I would not support Zoom summer school. They need to get off computers. So I think it's really going to depend on where we are in the pandemic, what is available, and what the staff can provide over the summer, because teachers are really going to need a break too. So ideally, sure. But the reality is they need to be off screens if they can be. We need to go visit family if we can. We need to run around outside if we can. And teachers need a break too. So we'll see.
Thank you. Ms. Ladimeric. Ms. Ladimeric is next.
Yes, sort of similar to what Ms. DiBrienza said. Yes, I support it as an option, but I will say definitely not if it's on Zoom. And I'm really worried about the burnout of teachers and classified staff and district staff. I think that no matter where you come down on supporting what the district's done and reopening, everybody has been working pretty much nonstop. And we got to give people a break over the summer. I think kids need a break too, and parents. I am concerned about learning loss. I'm concerned about mental wellness as much. I'm concerned about just the emotional stability of children and families and staff. So there are maybe some staff and teachers that have suffered economic hardship through the pandemic and would want to teach and would want to be available for summer school. But I certainly think it should be optional for families and for teachers.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel.
Yeah, no. School ends and we're done. I'm not in favor of extending hybrid learning, distance learning. I would be in favor of the online optional learning. That would be a good goal for the board, the cabinet, administrative staff to work towards. But again, it's something very light. This has been stressful for everyone. It's been really stressful for my wife. She's doing Spanish, English immersion, doing twice the work as other teachers. All those immersion teachers in Mandarin immersion and Spanish immersion have to do that. It's been stressful for my son, the distance learning and to start high school like that, all the freshmen, I'm sure it's the same. So this distance and hybrid is just not school as it ideally should be. So the superintendent, the board, the cabinet, they need to focus more in June on getting ready for August, which didn't happen this year. Let's not make that mistake twice. Let's start off 2021 to 2022 school year properly.
Thank you. Ms. Neiswander.
So I don't think it's a great idea to extend the school year if we're going to extend hybrid learning. I think that we may want to think about starting the next school year earlier. We started later this year, but starting earlier to bring kids back a little earlier to start that process of getting them engaged in learning and start trying to undo some of the loss that will just be increased by the summer break. I do think that students need a break, and they will need and want to be able to do fun things and go outside. But I also think it's troubling if we're telling kids you have to do something, you have to do this, and some families don't want to, and some families do. I almost would rather there not be a choice, but this is just something everyone does. So you don't have this feeling of the have and have nots, or this feeling of, oh, they're doing well, so they don't have to do it, and I'm doing poorly, so I'm not so good, that's why I have to do it. I worry about that impact on kids as well. And so I think we need to be very concerned about the overall impact of this kind of program on students' mental health as well.
Thank you. Mr. Collins?
I think there's going to be tremendous learning loss from March till next June. And I'm very supportive of extra school time being made available for any students who want it. I certainly shouldn't be mandatory for either teachers or for students. But I do think we're going to find that the learning loss is substantial, and the only way to make up for it is extra time. And this is particularly true of our least resourced and most challenged students who do not have the ability to get outside resources later and don't necessarily have supportive environments at home to address their learning loss. And so we're going to have to give people more school to get them to the point that their peers were at who had the advantage of a full year of in-person school. So I think we're one of the few districts that's going to have the resources to do that kind of thing. And I strongly think that we should explore it so that we can offer something as a choice to families who want it and children who need it.
Thank you so much. So this next question, when we were debating which questions to select, we chose as a wild card because hopefully it'll get some brainstorming going. And so the question is this: we live in a community that is blessed to have some of the top medical and educational minds in the country. How would you propose that we best utilize these resources? And we're going to start with Ms. Latimerich.
Oh, I love this question. I like to say that in business, when you're not good at something or you keep failing at it over and over again, you bring in a consultant to help you see your blind spots. So I love the idea of consulting outside experts to just help us, see what we're missing. And particularly because of that burnout that a bunch of us mentioned, we are having to reinvent education right now. And that requires all of us to be our best selves. And it's probably fair to say that not many of us are our best selves right now. So we could use all the help we could get. And I think that particularly with how you've combined the medical needs and the educational needs, let's talk to people, let's bring them in. I know what's wonderful about our community is that there are some of these top medical and educational minds are actually parents in our district. And they've been offering to help. So let's get help.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel.
Yeah, the Stanford doctors actually have been good to my family. When my kids were babies and had issues, there were parents in my wife's class who solved the problem fast. Now, Stanford is the medical program I focus on because in LA Unified 2 months ago, LA Unified got a contract with them to test all their staff, students, and families. That was 2 months ago. We just partnered with Stanford yesterday. Should have been done 2 months ago, but we can still, going forward, expand that to test students. I hear that we want to spend $200,000 on a public information officer. Well, that's a lot of tests at $30 a pop. So I'd like to take that money, and Todd Collins says we have money for a lot of resources. Let's take that money for testing. All the best countries have great testing programs. COVID is here for a couple of years. Let's go to testing.
Thank you. Ms. Neiswaner.
I think it's great that we have so many experts so close by. And I think that when we brought experts to one of the prior board meetings, it was really good for everybody to hear from them. And so I think we need to bring in the experts to talk to our community more, to have more Zoom updates on what Stanford experts think about the potential for spread of COVID, more people talking and providing information to our community for those that are interested, to give that data out. That sometimes if all you're doing is looking at Facebook, you just read one negative story after another. So you don't read about the 1 million students in Indiana who haven't gotten COVID. Instead, you read about the 4 that did. And so I think bringing more of those stories out, bringing those experts to our community, talking to our community more about what they're seeing and how they think it's best to deal with these things would be really beneficial to our community. And maybe that will help rebuild some trust in the fact that what we're doing should work and should protect our students and should protect our teachers.
Thank you. Mr. Collins.
Expertise is welcome. And we do have a lot of great resources in our community. And the more we can get them engaged, and frankly, it doesn't have to be, kind of marquee professors or doctors. There are many, many people who have both have the ability to contribute and expertise that's valuable to the district. I do think getting those people communicating with the district and kind of outside validation of things that the district is doing, or not validation as the case may be, is very helpful. I really agree with Karna. I think that's super helpful and kind of building trust and building a sense of confidence that the district's open to outside criticism and wants to hear what experts have to say. One expert that we have been relying on very heavily is Sarah Cody, who is, I think many people know, is a member of our community, alumna of our schools. And I think we need a lot, we can benefit from having a lot more like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. DiBianza.
Yeah, we have a community that is expert in a whole variety of things, and we have Stanford right across the street. And I think there are times that we have taken very good advantage of that, and times that we certainly could do more. Having the representative from the county here at 2 board meetings ago was really helpful. I think people really liked hearing from her. She spoke very honestly about what we know and what we don't know, and facts, right? It cut through a lot of the concerns. Certainly partnering with different organizations. I think our parents also can help us in this journey. One of the things that struck me early on, which I guess shouldn't be a surprise, but it did strike me, was that we heard from lots of people who are parents in the district who are doctors at Stanford. And one said, this is what's going on. You definitely cannot open up. And another one would say, I'm a doctor at Stanford and you guys have to open up. And I thought, oh my gosh, is there even a consensus here? But partnering in various ways with Stanford, both education and the medical school, as well as all kinds of experts around here, I think we really benefit from. And 2 meetings ago was a great example of that.
Thank you so much. Our next topic is special education. And the question we received is, what's your vision for special education at PAUSD? What's the biggest problem and opportunity for improvement? And leading off, we have Mr. Nagel.
So I've worked with special ed for over 20 years as an administrator, also as a teacher, but 20 years as administrator. So I've had, I managed a emotionally disturbed classroom at Marshall Lane in Saratoga. Then I came to Blackford in San Jose and did an orthopedically impaired program. Same thing at Juana Briones. They also had an orthopedically impaired program. So I had to really be a critical part of the 504 process, the IEP process. And here in Palo Alto, when I first got here in 2009, there was a better relationship with parents of special education students than there was when I left in 2012. That's only a 3-year difference. And that's the change we have to continue to make, is we need to focus on having better relationships with our parents of special education. It's difficult to be a parent of a special ed kid. It's tense. And so we need to have a good relationship and not an adversarial one.
Thank you. Ms. Neiswaner.
So growing up in San Mateo County, I was an instructional aide in high school and college during the summers in special ed classes. That's where I got to know the autistic kids, the kids that were occupationally handicapped. And a lot of them need a lot of support. They need a lot of help, and they might need a one-on-one. And so this is just going to be a growing expense for the district. And it's something where we need to figure out how we can best provide all of the services that these kids need. And it's not easy. And I don't think we should think of it as a trade-off to other kids. I think we should think of it as, what do we need to do and what infrastructure do we need to put in place to help these kids? Because for the most part, what I've seen from their parents is the parents are absolutely devoted to their children and they want the best possible educational support structure for their kids. And what we need to think about is how can we create that? And is that mainstreaming in some places? Is that creating separate classes in some cases? You know, are we forcing kids to take things that don't make sense, like a language when you don't know English? Or are we creating the right resources for each individual child?
Thank you. Mr. Collins.
Thanks. I am a special needs parent. I have a severely autistic son who attended PAUSD schools for a number of years and now is still a PAUSD student and attends a special school for autistic children. We actually have improved our special needs programs over the last 5 years through a combination of funding and program improvements that came out of a kind of sense of deep satisfaction 5 years ago with the delivery of special ed services. There are a couple things I think we need to do better and we can improve in, and then actually they'll help save us money as well as give to a better service. One is we send out a lot of kids to other programs that we could do ourselves. And I think most parents would love to keep their kids in PAUSD schools if the programs were there to serve their particular disabilities. And we need to build those programs. That will both save money and do a better job. We also need to focus on piloting things. We don't have the expertise to do some of the things we need to do. And instead of trying to figure out how to do it 12 schools at once, we need to do it at least one school and learn how to do it well, and then try to send it to the other schools to the extent it's needed.
Thank you. Ms. DiBrienza.
Thanks. I'm going to talk faster because there's so many things I have to say. First, I want to say that the thing that makes our special ed program great is our special ed staff. Our aides, our teachers, our case managers are wonderful. And every time I talk to a parent that is having a good experience, they can point to a staff member who has made a huge difference. So I'll just start there. One thing that we recently did, I think last year, was adopted a software program that aligns IEP goals to Common Core state standards. And I think that made a big difference because parents were feeling frustrated that goals were really vague or really wonky or really hard to measure. And now goals are more aligned with standards that we're trying to reach. So I think that that's an improvement. Communication is one of those things that has to be improved. Parents are very involved with their kids' lives if they are getting special services. And many of them told us during the shutdown that they just didn't know what was going on. So that is one huge improvement that we need to focus on when we do get a comms person or have a comms plan in place. And finally, expansion of services so that we're not sending as many kids out of the district and more of them can stay here.
Thank you, Ms. Lademaric.
So my vision for special education is that special education is general education. Every child is unique. No two children learn exactly the same way. And the more skilled our teachers are at providing differentiated instruction, the better educational outcomes will be for all our students. I think the biggest problem in our district right now is the waiting for failure approach. I think that has to change. I am in favor of shifting to a multi-tiered system of support, which takes a proactive approach to identifying students with academic or behavioral needs through early assessment and intervention. I think the biggest opportunity actually that we have is with structured literacy. And I want to prioritize immediate and full implementation of the dyslexia plan. And I was happy to see that on the November 10th board meeting agenda, an update on it. It's not a perfect plan, but for me, it's the biggest opportunity because it's an opportunity to actually prevent kids from getting into special education in the first place. There's something flawed right now in the way we're teaching kids to read, and this is an opportunity to fix that.
Thank you. I'm in the middle of a debate right now about how we're going to change up one of the questions. Okay, I think I figured it out. Okay, yes. So our next question is on screen and device-based learning. So the question is this: is the board looking closely at research on downsides of screen or device-based learning? There's lots of talk about giving kids access to apps and preparing them for modern technology, but no talk on the other side of the issue. What's the negative impact of this kind of learning? And first we have Ms. Nicewater.
So I'm not on the board, so I don't know if the board is currently looking into this, but I am sure that they will look into what are the long-term implications of the type of learning that we are currently providing to our students. From a parent's perspective, I think it is horrible because the kids are so focused on the screen and so focused on engaging via a screen, and they really need that in-person interaction, that in-person back and forth. My son says, you know, and has said since the beginning of the school year, Mommy, I will wear my mask, I will stay distance, just let me be in a class with a teacher, because he really needs that interaction, even if it's just for a few hours a day. And I think that this will have long-term implications for our kids, and we need to address it as we address the learning loss that's taking place. Because, you know, for some kids, like the Lexicor 5 or the Dreambox apps are good. They do introduce ideas, but I look at my child's writing and there's no actual editing from the teacher of like, this is what you're doing wrong, how do you improve it? So I think this online learning is losing a lot of that feedback loop as well.
Thank you. Mr. Collins.
Thanks, Chris. PAUSD has not traditionally been a district that has used computer-based learning or online learning or app-based learning. It's never been a big feature of our curriculum. Because I think our teachers believe that they have stronger tools in their toolkit, and feel and like whole class instruction, small group instruction, and one-on-one instruction that are just more effective. I think we've been forced to do distance learning as well as rely more on things like Dreambox and Lexia for asynchronous tools because of the circumstances, and I think that's good. I think it's an experiment that teachers will learn from, and they'll figure out if there are situations and kids that benefit from that, because I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all situation here. But that said, I expect that they will find that, as they thought before, that for most kids in most situations, those might be a supplement, but are not a primary way of teaching kids, and they'll use it as appropriate. I'm glad we have tools in the toolkit, but I don't think they'll be big features of our curriculum going forward.
Thank you. Ms. DiBrienza.
Yeah, I have big concerns about the quantity of screen time all of my children are having and all of our kids are having. There aren't a whole lot of other options right now, but it is of concern. And I have spoken with staff about it different times. I think that there is probably a happy medium between our asynchronous spring, which parents and some students found very frustrating, and now fully synchronous, where kids are on screens a whole lot more. Those sorts of apps like Lexia and Dreambox are both, they provide some skills, some practice, which is beneficial. And they also, I don't know if all parents know, but both of those programs have a very strong feedback loop, not directly to the student, but to the teacher, to let them know where gaps are or where progress has been made, so the teacher can adjust her instruction appropriately. So there is definitely a back and forth on that. Or something that impacts instruction. But I would like to see us beyond them less. And I think that once we are back to the normal times, they will continue to be used as supplements, but that's all.
Thank you. Ms. Ladimeric.
Yeah, again, I don't know if the board's looking closely at this, but I fully agree that we should, if this does not end up being a temporary phase of education. I'm very hopeful that it will be, and that we will be back in person in the fall, and that these apps can go back to being a supplement, or, you know, for kids to do for extra work if they want, as opposed to a fundamental part of the way we're delivering education. You know, this sort of connects to the previous question about the medical and educational minds in our community. I hope that if we do have to continue in hybrid learning, at least next year, that we will reach out to those people about this exact issue. You know, screens were already a problem for this generation of kids. I feel like it's a place where society's knowledge has outpaced our wisdom. We just don't understand what they're doing to our kids. And there are people who know better than most of us, and I hope we reach out to them if we have to keep using them.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel.
Well, I remember buying the first iPad in Palo Alto schools in 2010, and how it looked like more than half my staff was like, no, I don't want that in my room. But then when I went to Western Middle School in 2012, I had to get iPads for everyone because over half the students had no access to technology. Fast forward to my teaching of transitional kindergarten, first and second grade with a blind student and a one-to-one aide for the last 2 years. I'm a candidate with current teaching experience. And even though I had iPads all ready for them, brand new, we never used them. I've used all the educational apps that have come out in the last 10 years, including Dreambox, Lexia, and they're not terrible. They have a use, but it's limited. And so I especially don't like them for the younger grades. They need a teacher. They need a coach, a sensei, a maestro. These are the most important things in our elementary school students' lives. So I'm looking at small group instruction, one-to-one, classroom community, building relationships with just a great teacher. That's most important.
Thank you. And I'll hand it back to Chris Hurt for the closing statements.
All right. Now for closing statements, each candidate will now have 1 minute to make their closing statement. We are going to start off with Mr. Collins.
Thanks, Chris. And thanks everybody for joining and listening. This has been a great discussion. I think there's been a lot of provocative questions that hadn't gotten asked at other forums. So I really appreciate that. I love our schools. I mean, that's why I ran for school board in the first place. And that's why I would like to continue. We've got some very important work to do over the next few months to make sure kids learn during their most disruptive period in our entire lives. And it's going to be challenging and sometimes controversial, but if we focus on kids and family, keeping everybody safe and making sure we meet their needs, I think we'll get through it. When this is eventually over, we'll have the same issues we had before, plus new ones. But we've got money, we've got great teachers, we've got wonderful and supportive families. We will get through it. I've appreciated the chance to represent you the last 4 years and get the district on a better track. And I would love the chance to continue to serve for another 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Ms. DiBrienza.
Thanks. This next year is going to be filled with lots of uncertainty. We're going to have to be flexible, empathetic, and at times bold. We're going to have to continue to provide extra wellness supports and academic supports. We'll have to be agile as conditions and needs change, and we're going to have to communicate really well. Beyond COVID, we have important issues that remain. We have a dyslexia plan we have yet to fully implement. We're still aligning secondary courses and grading standards and assessments. We need wellness support for students and teachers and families more than ever. And the systemic work in serving all kids equally is just beginning. We're not always going to agree on the decisions, but we can come together after the decisions to make sure we're all moving together in the same direction safely and respectfully. This is a time for experienced leadership, empathy for all stakeholders, and renewed efforts to build systems that are rigorous, just, and equitable. Thank you for your consideration and giving me another 4 years to do this work.
Thank you. And Ms. Latimerek.
Thank you again for the opportunity to be here. I'm in this race to be a voice for students. As a parent of 4 who's also running a business, I understand how busy people are and how much wisdom and valuable insight PAUSD is missing out on. If elected, I am committed to proactively reaching out to students and families, teachers and staff, to making myself visible and accessible. It takes time to build trust, and I plan to just keep showing up until I do. I may not always agree with you, but I will always listen, and I will always value and represent your perspective. You know, kids are funny and smart and strong and kind and wise. Their capacity is limitless, and they deserve schools that make them believe all these things about themselves. By many metrics, PAUSD leads the nation in public education, but I believe we can be even better. I believe we can be the gold standard in providing all students with an education that is academically enriching, equitably delivered, and fosters the mental wellness and resiliency they need in order to thrive.
Thank you. And Mr. Nagel is next.
Okay. I want to thank PTAC for taking the time and effort to set up this forum tonight. These forums are helpful in getting my message out because I'm running on my 30 years of experience, my capabilities. I'm not spending, 10 grand on ads in the Palo Alto Weekly. I do have one campaign sign left. If you want one, email my son Mateo. He's my campaign manager. I'm also running on the breadth of my experience as a principal, teacher, and also a parent, which is the most important job I've ever had. It's also, though, just my favorite job as well. I think you're hearing tonight some admissions that mistakes have been made in the last couple of years. And because of that, I think we need a change in leadership. And that's why I'm running. It was a good thing that we had a change in leadership in 2018. It was a good thing we had a change in leadership in 2016. We need a little change in leadership right now in 2020. Very thankful to run, thankful to be here tonight. Make sure you visit principalmatt.com if you have any questions. If you want to donate, you can donate. You can donate to the East Palo Alto Tennis and Tutoring Program, as well as other places. Thanks.
Thank you. And Ms. Nicewaner.
Thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you all for listening. I want the opportunity to serve on this board because I think I can provide valuable background and insight and experience to help us move forward, to help us be more transparent and accountable to our community, and to help us with the communication challenges that we have. It's been really important to me in running to reach out and talk with a number of community members. And one of the things that has been raised to me is just this feeling of people not being heard, this feeling of cultural insensitivity or a sense of not belonging. And I think that's part of what's built this culture of lack of trust. And I think that I can help rebuild some of that trust and be that empathetic listener that reaches out and helps us grow into a better school district that really focuses on what's most important, which is serving our students and making sure that they have access to all of the resources to have the best education they possibly can have. And that each student is an individual, and we should really serve all of those individuals. Thank you so much, and please vote.
All right, thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm going to hand it back to Christina for some further information.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris Colohan, and thank you, Chris Hurt, for moderating this evening. I want to thank our candidates for sharing your vision and your goals for our school district with our community. A quick reminder to everyone that we have one more candidate forum scheduled for Saturday, October 17th from 3 to 5 p.m., which focuses on equity and special education. This information is on the PTA Council website, as well as provided in your e-news. I want to give a big shout out to our planning team and to our interpreters for their help this evening. And that concludes our forum for tonight. And I want to thank all of you for being with us. Good night and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.